All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with Ocean Networks Canada. My name is Kaylin Correa, and I will be moderating this session, as well as helping with our interactivity component. So I'm here with our speaker today, Luisa Sarmiento. First off, let me introduce Ocean Networks Canada's fall webinar series. The aim of this series is to offer free online interactive events featuring ocean-related topics. This series introduces both scientific and Indigenous approaches to understand ocean changes and their importance nowadays. Today's webinar will be about cultural resilience, how cultural traditions can contribute to sustainable livelihoods in South America, with our wonderful speaker, Luisa Sarmiento. So now let's see how you can participate in today's session. So as you can see on the screen, you can participate in Mentimeter. So simply go to mentee.com and enter the following code, 8037757. You can do this on your smartphone, use a different browser tab, or download the application Mentimeter. And if that's not possible for you, just go to our Zoom chat and you can put your answers and comments in there. All right, so I'll invite you now to answer our first question, just to give you a feel for how this works. So were you born relatively close to the place where you have lived the most? And close here means the same province, department, state, territory, or region. So you can go to mentee.com and enter that code 8037757. Okay. So most of you are saying no. Interesting. We have a few yeses. Okay, looks like most of you are saying no. We'll take a few more moments here to give you a chance to answer. More or less, yep. Okay, it looks like no seems to be the majority. I'm definitely a yes. I've stayed pretty close to home. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for trying that out. That's awesome. Perfect, and you'll have more opportunities to participate throughout the presentation. So now I'm very happy to introduce Louisa. Louisa is a wildlife biologist from McGill University. At the moment, she is completing her master's thesis in culture and traditional knowledge at Kiel University in Germany. She is an ocean science communicator at Ocean Networks Canada. And amongst many things, she also organizes ONC's 2020 webinar series. So you might recognize her as you've seen her moderating one of our previous sessions. Her work experience is mostly in virtual communication and live events. She is also one of the coordinators of the Virtual Blue Decade, a global platform for virtual collaboration and knowledge sharing on ocean issues. Louisa also enjoys learning languages and exploring cultural practices around the world. And finally, she is joining us all the way from Colombia today. So with that, I'll give the floor to you, Louisa.
Thank you so much, Kaylin, for that lovely introduction. I'm really happy to be here with all of you today. So as you know, by now, I'm in Colombia. So you can see it on the screen. That's where I am. Literally, I am in that little house in the mountains. So I'm in a very rural area of Colombia. I'm located in the region called Eje Cafetero, which means the coffee production region of Colombia. I am showing you this for two reasons. The first being is that the internet can be somewhat slower here. So if I freeze, I'll come right back, so don't worry. The second reason is to transport you into the warmth of these mountains. So before we begin anything, I want to thank our host nations. We acknowledge and respect the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wassanish peoples on whose traditional territories the University of Victoria stands, and whose historical relationships to the land continue to this day. So I also want to acknowledge my local host nations. I acknowledge and respect the Embera-Catillo, Embera-Chami, and Embera-Dubida peoples on which ancestral territory I stand today. They've lived together in a common space with similar language, cosmology, and cultural traits before the processes of colonization around 1511. So a bit more about my local host nations. The Embera people were divided due to the processes of colonization. This caused communities to be dispersed in different parts of the territories. In spite of this, some communities maintain cultural unity, preserving cultural elements such as language, spirituality, oral tradition, social organization, and many more. On the picture, you can see El Resguardo Indígena Tutumal. It's a reserve that is located right next to where I'm living, and the Embera Chami community lives there. I also want to tell you a little bit more about me. So on my mother's side, I am from this region, the Andes Mountains, so the coffee region part. This is mostly European descent. So you can see on the left side, pictures of my family and myself wearing a very traditional outfit of the region. On my father's side, I am from the coast of Colombia, so from the Caribbean. It's colonial Spanish, Senu people, and African descendants. So you can see on the screen my grandmother holding me and a few of my cousins. However, when I was young, around 5 years old, I migrated to Canada with my family, more precisely to Montreal, which is in Quebec, the French-speaking province of Canada. As you can see, Canada has been a lot of snow for me, and amongst other things. So in that particular area of Canada, there's a descendancy of First Nations and colonial French. I'm giving you all of these insights on me because I basically grew up around a lot of different cultures, which is probably why I ended up being interested in cultural resilience. My goal today is really to take you deeply into a cultural journey. Together, we're going to explore cultural traditions, but also the context in which they have evolved. We will also discover how culture influences ocean health. This is a short roadmap that you'll see again. I want to start with Ocean Networks Canada national and international collaborations, basically to see how it all relates to cultural resilience. But before, let's go to a mentee moment with Kaylin.
Awesome, thank you, Louisa. So our first question is, what does ocean health mean to you? So again, you can go to mentee.com and enter the code 8037757. So what does ocean health mean to you? All right, we'll give you a second to answer that. Definitely a big question. Hopefully there'll be many different kinds of answers here. All right, good climate. Okay, yes. Ecological sustainability. Ensuring the future of most current life forms. Yes. Sustainable planning and use. pH balanced and temperature balanced oceans, protected areas. Protecting our marine life. Diversity. Clean water. For sure, all of these are great. Sustainability, biodiversity in all its forms. Rich biodiversity, sustainable activities, greatly reduced pollution. Okay, back to you, Louisa.
I think all of these show a different side of what ocean health is. So thank you very much for that. All right, so some of ONC's work with Indigenous community is to look at the connection between Indigenous knowledge and scientific monitoring to inform about ocean health. So we're working very hard with Indigenous communities to bring together different types of knowledge. It is important to have multiple perspectives to truly understand ocean health and climate change. Indigenous communities are disproportionately affected by climate change, especially in coastal areas. But it is incredible to see how some communities continue to show resilience in their adaptation strategies. So today we're going to explore some of that. And on the picture, you can see an ice thickness measurement in Cambridge Bay in Nunavut, Canada. Some of you might have already seen this map from other webinars. So nationally, Ocean Networks Canada has partnered with numerous Indigenous communities to understand our oceans. So as you can see on the map, this is the base for ocean health. using multiple perspectives for science observation and data collection. ONC is also involved in a variety of international collaborations. For instance, Ocean Networks Canada played a key role in engaging Indigenous people and bringing Ocean Hubs 19 together. The Ocean Hubs 19 conference is a community-driven conference that brings together people from all around the planet to communicate the decadal progress of ocean observing networks. It is a beautiful example where ocean scientists and culture were brought together with different perspectives to understand and protect the oceans. For more detail on this, you can also watch our replay from the last webinar with Peter Romer on Indigenous engagement. So now I'm going to give you a bit of context of South America. In Latin America, Indigenous and Afro-descendant people have suffered structural discrimination because of their ethnic and cultural affiliations. So the scene of mobility between coastal, rural, and urban areas is very common, a lot of displacements. And of course, they often face poverty, the lack of access to basic services, the exclusion from educational services, amongst other things. So before we continue, I also want to ask another mentee question.
Awesome. So we want to know, have you visited Latin America? And if yes, what surprised you the most? So go to mentee.com and enter the code 8037757. I'm curious to see what you have to say here. I've never been to Latin America myself, so very interested. All right. So we have, sadly, no. I agree with you there. Diversity, warmth, and friendliness of people. Diversity, yes, definitely. Colorful clothes, the ability to quickly climb volcanoes. Yes, the difference between local areas and tourist-focused areas. Diversity, lots of diversity. The beautiful nature. Diversity again. Great. Most surprising how different all of these places are from each other. So again, diversity. Even the Spanish is different. Okay. Surprised by the delicious food.
So I think people insisted a lot on the diversity term, and it's true, Latin America is very diverse. So thank you for that. I'm glad to see that some of you have visited, and for those that haven't, maybe today will be a chance for you to kind of visit South America. So like you know already, we're going south. More precisely, we're going to Colombia, which is bordered by Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, and Panama. It has both the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, which is very particular because it's the only country in South America that has both. So the Pacific coast is a region with rainfall that sometimes exceeds 8,000 millimeters per year. So it's one of the rainiest in the world. So as you can see on the left picture, Pacific coast. The Caribbean coast is a bit drier, but it really depends on where in the Caribbean coast you're talking about. So as you know, or might not know yet, Colombia is one of the mega diverse countries in biodiversity. It ranks first for bird species. Colombia is the second most biodiverse country in the world, just after Brazil, which is approximately 7 times bigger. So although Colombia is an intermediate-sized country, it holds a lot of biodiversity and a lot of endemic species. So these are some of the species that you can find here in Colombia. Now we're going to the water. So the picture that you're seeing, it's a picture that I took when I was on a 4-day expedition to reach La Laguna del Otún. These immense lakes are the source of water for the region that I live in. The Laguna El Otun is a glacial origin and is fed by melt waters of the Nevado Santa Isabel. So it's basically almost eternal snow, really, really high mountains that feed this Laguna El Otun. And then in return, it creates rivers that flow down into the cities. This expedition was for me a major revelation. I saw the mountains crying. So you may see it on the right side picture. There's a lot of cascades that flow out of the mountains. And for me, it was very, very emotional when I saw that. I felt very deeply connected to water. So I'm showing you this also to show you that water is everywhere and it has an origin and it finishes up in the sea often. In South America, old legends say, first there was the sea. Everything was dark. There was no sun, no moon, no people, no animals, no plants. The sea was everywhere. The sea was the mother. The mother wasn't people or anything at all. She was the spirit of what was to come, and she was thought and memory. And then life was born from the union of water and sky. So it's a very old legend that exists in Colombia, but similar legends are scattered all over Colombia, talking about the origin of water and the origin of the sea and how it was everything. In the Amazon River, water is the origin of the culture too, for society and in the rituals too. In the Amazon River lives the great snake, the anaconda. In several stories, the anaconda vomits the first man. So in others, a mythical man throws himself into the river, fleeing from some danger and becomes a snake. So the anaconda also appears as a mysterious and evil force that hides underwater. So although the Amazon is inland, it still has a strong connection with water, obviously. So now we're going to jump right up into resilience and sustainability. But before, let's go to a mentee moment.
Thank you, Louisa. Okay, so what is one way that you have been resilient during the pandemic? So once again, you can go to mentee.com and enter 8037757. Let's see. Learning how to work productively from home. Definitely, I am learning the same thing. Keeping up with my studies despite everything going crazy. For sure, for sure. Follow advice from experts. Accessing numerous ways to continue to learn and explore the world. Yes, of course. Online Spanish lessons, meditation. Very nice. Learning to be a puppy parent. Definitely learning about new ways to access information is a big one, I think. Enjoying my home instead of travel, for sure. Managing computer disk space. Learning to take care of my physical and mental health, definitely. So taking care of yourself is a big one too. Couple more, chess. Nice. Some entertainment. Great, thank you everyone.
Thank you for those great answers. I think it kind of makes us feel that we're all in the same boat. So I wanted to ask that to kind of make you feel what resilience is in your life. So I'm going to talk about ways that Indigenous have shown resilience. Resilience describes that ability to survive difficult situations without lasting impairment. So either that be the ones that you all mentioned, or evangelical missions, residential schools, disposition, or exploitation. So let's continue. Historically, the term resilience, it arose from ecology. It was initially intended for ecosystem thinking, but when translated into social sciences, engineering, psychology, anthropology, and many more, it can often ignore the human-power relationships and socioeconomic factors. So it is a really big term, and it has influence and is influenced by everything. So to give you maybe a better feel of what it is, we're going to explore some of the indicators that can show us what is resilience, or if it's present. And I will take you through these 4 indicators to see how culture is present in all of them. So the first indicator would be landscape, seascape, diversity, and ecosystem protection. So recognizing and building upon the intimate knowledge possessed by fishing communities about adapting to and caring for changing ocean resources is an essential step towards sustainable ocean management. So as an example that you can see in the picture, the caballito totora, they are a reed watercraft used by fishermen in Latin America for the last 3,000 years. And this practice is still being used today. The fibers of the plant allow it to be impermeable, flexible, and light, which is perfect to ride the Pacific waves. Fishermen usually leave before sunrise. They paddle out, fish with fits in their bags, and they go back home. The larger fish will go to the markets, and the smaller fish will serve to feed their families. So when fishing is not possible, they use their caballito totora to take tourists around. So in other terms, this ancestral fishing practice with low impacts for the ecosystem, it's a cultural inheritance that has shown resilience up to today. So the second indicator would be biodiversity. And in this sense, I'm going to be talking about agricultural biodiversity. So traditional and locally adapted forms of agriculture, they have existed for thousands of years. It has been passed down by generations with rituals and lifestyles. So seeds are the center of life. To have good seeds, to have a good harvest, you must first obviously have good seeds. So as an example, the Arawak people, which are my local host nations, cultivate more than 30 varieties of corn, which is now the center of their cosmology. So as you can see on the picture, there are other corn types than the yellow that we typically know. There's green, there's purple, there's black, and of course there's red. All of those have different properties and different flavors. So the cultivation of chami, or chocosito, corn was developed in the rainforest ecosystems here in Colombia. So in regions that have rainfalls exceeding 8,000 millimeters per year, so in the Pacific of Colombia. This makes it a very strong corn that has very special characteristics because it has a capacity to grow in wild conditions and to withstand flooding. So on the left side, you can see another picture, which is terracing. It's a common agricultural technique in mountainous coastlines. We're going to now visit the indicators of governance and social equity, livelihoods, and well-being. These indicators are often associated with social movements and fights, which show the resilience of indigenous people nowadays. Recently in Colombia, around 7,000 indigenous people marched more than 120 kilometers to the capital city, Bogota. It has been a very peaceful and organized movement to protest the violation of human rights and the rise in violence against indigenous people in Colombia. This movement is called Minga. Minka in Quechua is an ancient tradition of community or collective work for social purposes. The meaning of la minga derives from the knowledge that the indigenous had, that by doing a shared work for the common good, well, it is done faster and better. The importance of la minga lies in the attitudinal value of the event. So when the leaders were called the people, the great majority of the population came, mobilized and organized in such a way that, well, the physical effort that the Minga represented became a true celebration of life, of love, a real party, basically. So although we've touched on culture, now we're going to go a bit deeper and discuss its difference with traditional knowledge. But before, let's go to a mentee moment.
Great. Thank you, Louisa. Very interesting video. So now give us some examples of cultural traditions in your life. So as you know, you can go to mentee.com and enter 80 37 75 7. So what are some cultural traditions in your life? Let's see here. This one might take some more time to think about. For me, it's definitely family. Family and food are big ones. All right, food, yes, family reunions, celebrating Christmas, Easter fires and parties, spring cleaning, Halloween, Passover, so yeah, celebrations for sure. Indonesian food, Tibetan momo dumplings, bagpipes, celebrating with food, yes. Awesome answers. Nature, another interesting one. Back to you, Louisa.
Yes, those are very interesting cultural traditions, and I think many of us can relate to many of those. Also, I saw that in the Zoom chat, we have a language, which we're going to look into also. So let's continue. In other words, all of these cultural traditions are forms of art, rituals, healing, assisting many of those. So with that, we're gonna go visit the Kuna people. They're located in the Choco region in the Pacific coast of Colombia. So you can see it on the map in red. And one of their most precious cultural tradition is weaving. So the economy of the Kuna people is based on agriculture, fishing, and the manufacture of clothing with a long tradition of international trade. So they have distinguished themselves from other indigenous communities for their economic independence. So for instance, coconuts and lobsters are the most important source of export products. The sale of molas provide other sources of income too. You will see in a few moments. What is the difference between culture and traditional knowledge? Well, we're gonna work through an example. Both of those things work together, they change together. So they can be really separated from each other. You can see on the screen tule mola in Guna, which means Kuna's people's clothing. So it's a typical blouse that is worn by Kuna woman daily. So the one that you can see on the right side, it was gifted to me by a Kuna woman. So what they typically do is that they confection tule molas for themselves. And once they don't want to wear them anymore, well, they either sell them or gift them. So what it represents, it's culture. So in this case, it's a labyrinth. It's a labyrinth that traps bad spirits and bad energies. But how to confection it, well, that's more traditional knowledge. In this case, it's using the technique of appliqué and reverse appliqué. So now, as other examples of culture, we're gonna go to La Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta on the Atlantic coast or the Caribbean coast of Colombia. It's an isolated mountain range in the northern Colombia by the Caribbean coast. As you can see it on the right side picture. It's one of the world's highest coastal ranges. So its altitude is up to 5,700 meters. And it serves as a source for over 36 rivers. In that mountain range live the Arawak people. So violence has been very present in the story of the Arawak people. For centuries, they have been confronted with processes of colonization, conflicts with armed groups, and drug routes. The entry of the Capuchin religious order in the 18th century had the strongest impact in their doctrine. However, their ethnic resistance was very strong, and the Arawak people managed to expel the Capuchin religious order in 1980 without using violence. So if you think about it, it's only 40 years ago. I'll play once again the video so you can look at the images. The Arawak people chose to preserve their spirituality as a method of resistance. For that centuries ago, they secluded themselves and found refuge in the highest parts of the Sierra Nevada. Only centuries later were they able to return to the sea. So what is amazing about all of that is the resilience of the Arawak people. They have been able to resist, protect their territory and their culture. So as you can see on the screen, like Leonor Salawata said, with the strength of nature and spirituality, it is impossible to destroy people. So now I wanna play a little video. I wanna give you a sense of what the Arawak people are all about. In the beginning of all, the Arawak people were given the mission to care for the environment around them. To them, the sea is feminine. It's a mother. It's the blood of the earth. It nourishes everything, and it purifies all. Basically, it is sacred. The destruction of the sea is also the destruction of humanity. Now let's watch the video.
Senjanika tinggi. Tinggi zari anu ke koi na kampung na anu. Be gizani kuna na kinaran. Zanung wanika. Anu gizan kinan bunt kin kere kup kinan zunna de. Inga jike gundere. Ingi ke pak me zunna kampung na kan. Jeke kwa kumana sana, jeke kagam mulai mike ibonam pernah sana. Ini tim kena, kebetulan kwa kumana pernah ni sana kena dah juga, ibu jenazah kwa kumana ini siapa kumana.
La Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, Miriumuque, como la llamamos nosotros, está ubicado en el norte de Colombia, entre los departamentos de Cesar, Guajira y Magdalena. La Sierra Nevada es un espacio sagrado, la comprende, ¿no? Desde los picos nevados hasta el mar.
Kanande Spanyol jina vinking no jere yik bizan ke azaz ojana znan ya vikanga vinking no jere ma yik sawana ligna khoizo jana re sawana nan bir kawali kana ga sidori ko yikri kan kana ligum zoje kara zoja bi.
This is a short documentary, and I'll provide the link to the rest of it so you can look at it. So the Arawak people. The Arawak people, like you've seen, you saw in the video, live mostly from agriculture and farming. And their vestiary has different spiritual meanings. So the white represents the earth, the snow. The pointy hat represents the peak of the mountain. On the bottom left, you can see an image of the Tayrona National Park. This park has a very, very strong Arawak influence. It is located on the coast of the Sierra Nevada. where the Arawak people live. Each year, the natural reserve has around 3 closures agreed upon with indigenous people of the area. This serves as a process of spiritual cleansing of the ancestral territory. It is the return of the Arawak people to the sea. On the upper right corner, you can see a mamo. These are the spiritual guides for the Arawak people. So mamos and authorities of the 4 indigenous groups who live in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta will go down to the Tayrona Park for around 13 days. So they will seclude themselves in the park for 13 days without any tourists, without any staff members of the park, just themselves. So just like the water that is born at the highest peak of the mountain, the Sierra Nevada, they will follow the rivers until they reach the ocean again. The payment is to love and to thank Mother Earth for giving them the wonderful things to survive. The ritual is something very special. Sometimes it can be, they can guide us, the tourists, through this ritual, but often it's something very private and highly, highly spiritual. In the middle picture is the houses of the Arawak people high up in the mountain. Some of this architecture was taken by the Tayrona National Park to incorporate in its sacred sites and also in its hotels or housing facilities. So let's go now to a bit of a long conclusion. First, we also go to a mentee moment.
Okay, so our very last question, has your understanding of ocean health and its connection to culture changed? So again, visit mentee.com and enter 8037757. So after this presentation, has your understanding changed? Okay, so we've got a yes and an I'm not sure. Couple more yeses. Okay, we've got a few I'm not sures. Some more yeses. All right, Louisa, what are your comments on this?
So it's interesting to see that that debate. I think it's mostly a yes, but definitely ocean is something that is very separated from us often. We see ocean as being something far away that doesn't have maybe direct links to our culture, especially for people that grew up inland. But it has a lot of influence for coastal people and especially indigenous people. Thank you for those answers. So now let's go to our final remarks on this. These are the pictures that you have already seen in the talk. Humans influence dramatically the ocean health. So either that being the exploitation of natural resources, massive fishing, it has very tons of influence. Indigenous communities often operate in relationship to their environment, so caring for biodiversity and spirituality, which provides goods and services needed for the well-being of their communities. This is because over thousands of years, cultural elements have developed in close relationship with ancestral territory, which has led to a collective memory being transmitted orally. Resilience here describes that ability to survive years of destruction and keep caring for our planet. Well, for me, the ocean is sacred, and it gives life to all of us. Although some were born far away from the sea, we all come from water. Its fate, it's tied to ours. At the end, well, we kind of all go back to water somehow. So with that, I want to say thank you all for participating and hope to see you soon again.
Thank you very much, Louisa. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your stories with us. It was so interesting to hear about a country across the world. So thank you again. And yes, thank you all participants. These are the links that Louisa has used in her presentation, and we will be sending them out in our post-webinar email, so keep an eye out for that. I'd also like to remind you all that we do have 3 more webinars coming up. Our next one is 2 weeks from now on ONC's fall expedition season. And then we have one on the importance of community observatories. And finally, our last one in December will be on the impacts of underwater noise on marine life. So please be sure to join us for those. You can always connect with Ocean Networks Canada. So visit our website. We have tons of information there, and also our ocean data portal, Oceans 2.0. So we have data coming in 24/7, and it's very fun to look at. You can also follow us on our social media channels. We have YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And finally, feel free to email us always at learning@oceannetworks.ca. Great, and thank you to our funders. Ocean Networks Canada is funded by the Canada Foundation for Innovation, the Government of Canada, Natural Resources Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Canary, the Government of British Columbia, the University of Victoria, and many more. All right. So now we will start our question period. For those who cannot stay with us, please just fill out our satisfaction survey, which we will post in the chat right about now. And we will be recording this webinar, so you can always go back, and we'll send that link in our email as well, so you can have a look. And for those staying, please enter your questions in Mentee now. You can go enter the code 8037757. So we'd love to hear what you have to say. And again, feel free to use the Zoom chat if Mentimeter is not accessible to you. So we'll give you some time to get those questions in there.
Thank you for those that are leaving us. And thank you, Kaylin, also.
Yes, no problem. Thank you, Louisa. Definitely a lot of material, so.
Yes, and feel free to ask questions on Ocean 2, or if you have questions on ONC, we also have people from ONC that can answer those.
Definitely. Okay, so our first question, what are some distinctions between the Caribbean coastal people and the Pacific coastal people in Colombia?
Yes, so the Caribbean coastal people, like I mentioned, they come from descendants of colonial Spanish, but the Senu people also, which are indigenous peoples that were originally in that area. And there's also a lot of Afro descendants. In the Pacific coast, we see more of a Afro-descendant population. So basically the difference between these two coasts is that historically slaves were brought from Africa into the Caribbean coast, into Cartagena, which was one of the biggest ports for colonial slavery, sadly. So from there, a lot of people, after being freed, they just, well, obviously they stayed there, but they also mixed with indigenous people that were living in that area before they secluded themselves inland. And on the Pacific coast, since it's more of a rainforest, more jungly, a lot of the indigenous people lived a bit more inland. The ports over there, Buenaventura was one of the colonial ports which brought slaves also from Africa. And so in other words, in the Pacific, you can see more Afro-descendants. On the Caribbean coast, you tend to see more of a mixture that is very strong between indigenous and Afro-descendants.
Okay, thank you, Louisa.
Yes.
All right, we have another question. What differences have you observed between Canadian and Colombian connection to the ocean?
So I think definitely obviously in the Arctic in Canada, how the origin of the sea and how it came to be and be the first and very important. So I think that's one of the strongest connection in that sense for the ocean. In other terms, also the fishing, so how to fish and the rituals involved in that, I think it's fairly similar. But you have to still look at the geographical distance and how it has been separated for thousands of years. So they have separated the cultures. And although maybe we all originated from the same place, they have evolved differently. So climate is still dictating a lot of the cultural changes. So in South America, it's been very warm for many years. And in the Arctic, well, it has been a different climate. So that has also shaped culture, language, food, and different practices too.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, how much Indigenous reconciliation is happening in Colombia?
Yes, this is a very big question. So like I mentioned, historically, Indigenous people in Colombia have suffered the most. So from the beginning of all, when the colonizers arrived, there was a lot of extermination and oppression. So a lot of Indigenous people were killed, exterminated in some areas. So historically, that has carried a lot. And in the last century, there was a lot of putting Indigenous peoples in reserve. So a bit like in Canada, right? So put them there. Here they're called resguardos. And so to basically give them a land that is often not their ancestral territory, and to say, well, you can live here. You don't have to pay taxes. You don't have to basically pay anything. You're free to be yourselves, but in this area, which is often, like I mentioned, not their ancestral land. And that makes a really big difference to Indigenous people. So recently, I think in the last maybe 15 years, there has been a bit of a progress there, especially due to the fact that, well, in Colombia, we have a lot of Indigenous communities. But internationally, maybe in the last 15 years, there has been a lot of work towards getting to know Indigenous communities, so getting the word out there and trying to maybe find the injustices and try to resolve them. So with that international help, a lot of Indigenous communities have been able to kind of do land claims to reclaim their ancestral territory. But Colombia is a very particular country because in addition to all of that, as it was not enough, there has been over 50 years of a civil conflict in here, mostly due to drugs, so cocaine. There has been a lot of people that have suffered injustices, so peasants or even my family. So one of the reasons that I had to leave Colombia is because my family was threatened to be killed. So there's a lot of injustice here in Colombia. So it is very hard for Indigenous to voice themselves amongst all of these unjust situations. And I can say that, yes, there has been a bit of progress, but it is just not enough. And it's very little to compare to all the historical damages that are caused by all these colonization processes.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, our next question. Has Colombia established marine protected areas or are new MPAs being planned?
Colombia is a bit, has been a bit slower in that sense. So I'm not sure if they have established, well, there are marine protected areas where, let's say in the Parque Tayrona, where I took you close to the Sierra Nevada, that's a marine protected area. But it's not everywhere. And it's something that many scientists are kind of now fighting for to have. But it's very political in Colombia, and it's often a question of who wants to have that route for boats or whatever. So, well, now it's getting better, and we have many marine projects going on the coast. The Pacific coast, for instance, is one of the coasts that is the most forgotten in Colombia, because in the Pacific coast, it was a very common route for cocaine transport. So it's a coast that basically nobody wants to touch. Nobody wants to help, especially because there's a lot of violence in that area. So there's a lot of mining in that area. So where there's mining, there's a lot of conflict. So it's very rich in gold. The northern part of Colombia, it's extremely rich. So since it's both a jungly area and a coastal area, the government has done very little efforts to protect that. So yeah, we'll see.
Okay. Next question. You mentioned the anaconda myth of the snake vomiting first people, but that was on land. Are there any Colombian myths involving sea creatures?
So I am pretty sure there are myths that involve sea creatures. These myths go back to really, really old times, because indigenous people have been pushed inland due to colonization. So often also these myths are not well documented. It's an oral tradition, so it's difficult to know them. But the Arawak people that I mentioned, they, before the colonization, they already dominated the seas. They had really, really large boats, and they were able to go out into the sea and to fish. So it has been proven just recently. So it's interesting to see, well, that now maybe some of those myths are lost, but definitely the origin of the Arawak people is in the sea, in the coast. So I'm sure they have.
Thank you, Louisa. So that's all of our questions. A big thank you again to all of you. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you can stay up to date and participate in our upcoming events. And again, please just take a few minutes to complete our satisfaction survey. You can find the link in the chat once again. And we hope that you all have a fabulous day or evening wherever you are.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Hope to see you soon. Bye.